My interest in music and the brain began several decades ago. I was very fortunate to know a very astute man in Chicago, Irving Harris. Irving Harris made a lot of money in advertising, and he was incredibly generous with the money in terms of financing a lot of research that was going into studying early childhood development, and specifically early childhood development vis-a-vis music. So really 25 or 30 years ago, I became quite interested, obviously, in what this might mean. And I've always kept up with my interest. Clearly, what we've known for decades is that infants exposed to classical music have physiological changes in their brains which are beneficial. They actually develop more synapses. Synapses are the connectors which help us think. And babies exposed to classical music happen to build more synapses than babies who aren't exposed to it. This has been known for a very long time. Over years, these past decades, I've seen proliferation of neuroscientists who have become fascinated and involved in music as it relates to neuroscience. Very specific, different interests. For instance, there are people who study Parkinson's and music with Parkinson's. And there are people who study autism and music. There are people who study aphasia. Aphasia is when you have a stroke, for instance, and lose the ability to speak. And all of these different aspects of the brain and the function of the brain have enormous potential in their relationship to music and how music affects brains. So, for instance, we've seen videos of Parkinson's patients who are incapable of movement because that's what Parkinson affects. It affects movement particularly. And I've seen video of patients who cannot stand up or walk, have earphones put on them with music that has some kind of a regular beat, for instance, Ravel's Bolero or something like that. And they can stand up and walk to the rhythm of that music. Down the hallway, turn around, walk back. If you take the headset off, they're incapacitated. The work with people who have suffered from aphasia, where their speech is gone, what they find is that the pathway that the brain receives music is a completely different one from the pathway that you receive speech. So what they do now is teach these people to sing because they're able to. They're able to sing, whereas they're not able to speak. And by singing, they can express themselves, and gradually you transform that into speech again. So that has to do altogether with what we call brain plasticity, the ability of brains to recalibrate from injuries or anything that makes you incapable. All of this led me to organize a symposium, which we did in 2012, seems like a century ago now. And with the enormous and fantastic help of a person on our board, Dr. Cheryl Willman, who at that time in 2012 was the head of the cancer center at UNM in Albuquerque. She helped me organize this so that we could provide ongoing medical accreditation for doctors or nurses or anyone who attended. She helped put together a little committee of exactly the right people to figure out who we wanted to invite. And we identified about a dozen, I would say a dozen of the neuroscientists working in this field from England, from Canada, from all around the country, from Harvard, from Tufts, from Davis in California, Ohio State University, Montreal, McGill. They all came for 3 days and made presentations. Some of the more fantastic ones were, for instance, a gentleman in Ohio named David Huron, who studies goosebumps. He has tiny, tiny, tiny little cameras that he can attach to the back of people's necks.
So, music-induced shivers is commonly reported as a notable or peak emotional response. And in the research literature, it's sometimes referred to as thrills or chills, or there's a technical name for it, which we like to use, called frisson. So it also makes it easier if you're looking on Google if you want to find that and not find all sorts of other chills that have to do with air conditioning or something like that. Well, you hardly need to show what it looks like, but this is the hair follicles that result from getting goosebumps. The technical name for this is piloerection, which for my students has a very high snicker factor as a term. It's accompanied by a cold sensation when you have this. You often will shudder or shiver. The experience can last from a second or so to 10 seconds or more. And when they're longer forms, usually it involves one or more waves of this spreading kind of goose flesh that you have, or goosebumps. Of course, music isn't the only thing that can cause what you might call hair-raising experiences. We can also have the hair on the back of our neck stand up for other things, like climbing into a warm bath, unexpectedly being touched by a potential romantic partner, riding a roller coaster. There are also unpleasant experiences that we can have that would be hair-raising, such as fingernails scratching across a blackboard, encountering a wild animal, hearing someone scream. That would do a very good job. In fact, I could do a demonstration if you would like, but no, I'll pass on that, okay. And riding a roller coaster. You notice that's on both of my lists here. So some people can have a pleasant experience and other people can have a very unpleasant experience. So we might ask the $64,000 question here, which is what distinguishes pleasant goosebumps from unpleasant goosebumps? And how is music able to evoke this very memorable experience?
And when we have that very human function of flight or fight, and certain physiological transformations happen, we get goosebumps on the back of our neck. Lo and behold, David Huron can induce those with very specific passages of music. If you're listening to a wind ensemble play and there's suddenly something unexpected, either very loud where you don't expect it to be, or even a change in harmony, which is totally unexpected, which goes in a direction that is not anticipated, we get goosebumps. He actually, during the symposium, gave a presentation with an audience inducing goosebumps in the audience by having a brass quintet play very particular passages. Another gentleman actually, I shouldn't say it, but my favorite, uh, Anirudh Patel, who is now at Tufts, and he works very specifically with music and language, different languages. Uh, so, for instance, he can show you how French-speaking people will write different music than English-speaking people or Russian-speaking people. That there is something about how our brains process language, which is very much attuned to how our brains process music. And he can show how the different language cultures result in different musical cultures.
And so one idea is emerging is that early in human evolution, this was a way, synchrony with other people was a way of kind of building bonds, social bonds, and feeling more aligned with them. And now that's inspiring a number of experiments showing that if people synchronize with each other, they're more likely to be cooperative afterwards on non-musical tasks. This even influences children down to, we saw a video yesterday of 14-month-olds, and if they moved synchronously with somebody else, they're more likely to be helpful if a situation arose where somebody needed help. It's really quite remarkable. And I think this has interesting implications for social development.
One of the other most fascinating things to me is lullabies. All over the world, in every culture, every mother sings their babies lullabies. And there is a great similarity in the way these lullabies are written, so that cross-culturally, the results are pretty much the same. And this is, if you think about it, some of the most powerful and the first encounters that a human child has with their parent. This comforting, this calming, this expression of love that is a lullaby. All of this is, to me, indicative of the power of this musical language. We know it affects plants. That's that old book. We know that it affects us emotionally. We know that it affects our moods. We know that it affects us physically. It calms us down or it can excite us. But actually, all of this is also brain function. The ongoing development of this area of research is amazing. They're now have little skull caps, something like a shower cap, with receptors that they can put on infants and measure exactly how they react to the musical experience. Interestingly, some of my composer colleagues are petrified to know anything about this. They don't want to know. You know, it's so intuitive how music is created and how it's played. They don't want to have any acknowledgement that actually it's brain function and the very specific sounds induce very particular brain function. But I find it all integrative. This is all one thing, the emotional aspect, the brain aspect, and all of that. So in the interest of continuing a kind of relationship with this fascinating world, I'm looking at starting a series at our noon concerts, which would be 1 hour, 45 minutes to an hour, probably on Mondays, and bringing one by one all of these neuroscientists to tell us about the world that they're exploring. We will start that next summer with 2 or 3, and then expand according to how it's received. But I think it will be quite fascinating for everybody to hear the kind of experimentation that's going on. One of the things I would love to do is hook up musicians and set up a screen on stage so that we can watch as they play a piece what their brain activity is in different parts of the brain, and have someone explain to us what's going on. Because obviously the musicians, when they're playing, are engaged in this in real time. But my guess is that the audience is as well, and probably in the same way. One of these neuroscientists was here once, and I told him that my belief is that human beings are biologically tuned to music, and that it's on a cellular level that we biologically react to these sounds in a very specific way. And what he said to me was, Mark, I'm a scientist. I can't say that, but I'm spending my life trying to prove it.